week 6 of the fantasy football season. He's a top 36 running backs I'm ranking this week. First back, Derrick Henry of the Baltimore Ravens. What a year it's been for Derrick Henry. I thought the numbers were going to start declining this season, but obviously he looks stronger than ever, and he fits perfect in this Baltimore Raven offense. So this week in the matchup, I know Washington's been playing better as late on the defensive end of things, but Derrick Henry, he's been a Mack truck this season, running over defenders and making big plays weekly and finding the end zone. Number 2, Saquan Barkley of the Philadelphia Eagles. What a season it's been for Barkley in his first year with this Philadelphia Eagle team. And this week, a pretty good matchup versus the Cleveland Browns, where their defense can't stop anyone. Saw Brian Robinson less than 100% find the end zone twice last week versus Brown defense. And I think Saquon, with this offense healthy and back going, he's definitely a running back that could be a top option this week. Number 3, Alvin Kamara of the New Orleans Saints. I think we're going to see more volume in this one from Kamara, with Derek Carr out of the lineup and out with the oblique injury to miss multiple weeks. And now they're going to go to either the rookie or Jake Haener in this ball game versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So a lot of Kamara, a lot of dump-offs, I believe. They're going to try to get him 15, 20 carries in this one as well. And this is most likely their only chance they're going to try to win the game through, because I don't know if they're comfortable with these quarterbacks trying to stretch the field and getting the football down the field. Number 4, Jordan Mason of the San Francisco 49ers. Mason's been a perfect fill-in for Christian McCaffrey this season. And last week, I thought he should have got the ball a little bit more. Only 14 carries, solid 89 yards in that game. And Mason, we know, is an explosive running back. 3 games this season, over 100 yards on the ground. And this week, a good matchup at Seattle that just got torched by Tyrone Tracy for 130 yards on the ground. Number 5, Jahmyr Gibbs of the Detroit Lions. Gibbs a good matchup this week at the Dallas Cowboys. They're banged up. We don't know if Micah Parsons is going to play again in this one. DeMarcus Lawrence is out. So this Cowboy team, they're all banged up, and they're down to the 4th, 5th options on the defensive line in some positions. So this week in a potential shootout in Jerry World at Dallas, I like Gibbs to have a big performance. Number 6, Brian Robinson of the Washington Commanders. Brian Robinson, what a season it's been for him. Last week, 2 touchdowns. This week, though, the game script might go a little opposite, where obviously they're not going to be playing with a lead, possibly at the Baltimore Ravens, where Robinson still could catch the football out of the backfield, but obviously he's more efficient as a running back in between the tackles. And also we know Austin Eckler is one of the better receiving backs in the league, but Brian Robinson's been playing great football. And this week, once again, at Baltimore, he's a great option. Number 7, Chuba Hubbard of the Carolina Panthers. 3 games in a row over 90 yards on the ground is Chuba Hubbard, including 2 of them 100+ on the ground. He's one of the best backs so far in fantasy football. Jonathan Brooks, though, he could be back in a few weeks, and he's definitely going to get some work in this offense. But Chuba Hubbard's playing great. He's doing it all, and I never thought he could be an every down back that could handle 20, 25 carries, but so far he's done that as Chuba Hubbard, and he's looked good. In this week, a good matchup versus the Falcons, where last week their defense gave up a lot of points up and down the field. Number 8, Kenneth Walker of the Seattle Seahawks. Kenneth Walker's been solid so far for the Seahawks team. We know he missed 2 games with the oblique in week 2, week 3. Then week 4, the monster return game for him, 3 touchdowns in that one at the Lions. And then last week, he still carved out a decent role where he added 7 catches, 57 yards. So this week in a matchup versus the San Francisco 49ers, I think they're going to have to run the football more. Last week, I don't know what this Seattle team was, where they were doing. They weren't running the football a whole lot. And Kenneth Walker's a great talent. Number 9, Josh Jacobs for the Green Bay Packers. It's been a good year in his first season with this Green Bay Packer team. Jacobs a solid back-end 1, RB2 weekly for fantasy owners. This week, a good matchup versus the Arizona Cardinals, where their run defense and defense in general has been torched for the majority of the season. So this week, I think Jacobs goes out there, has a nice performance. Number 10, Jonathan Taylor of the Indianapolis Colts. I know he's got a high ankle sprain. I know he missed last week's game, and Trey Sermon looked good replacing Jonathan Taylor. But this week, I believe there is a possibility Taylor returns to the lineup. So I think this week is a tougher matchup, no doubt. In Tennessee, one of the better and underrated defenses in the league in terms of yards per game to opponents. But I believe if Taylor returns, he's still one of the better backs in the league. And injuries have just been the only thing holding him back this season. So if he plays, he's number 10. If not, he's off the list. And Trey Sermon is a top 24, 30 option. 11, James Cook of the Buffalo Bills. He's been one of the only bright spots consistency-wise in this offense is James Cook. And I believe he's one of the better running backs in all pro football. So this week, a tougher matchup, no doubt about it, the New York Jets, one of the better defenses in the league. And now defensive coordinator is the head coach for this Jet team with Robert Saleh out as the head coach for New York. But James Cook could do it all, catch the football out of the backfield, in between the tackles. He's a real 3-down back. And this week at the Jets on Monday night, I think this Bill team, they want to establish the run more in this one. Number 12, James Conner, the Arizona Cardinals this week. Not a great matchup at Green Bay. Good run defense, underrated defense as well. But Conner's a workhorse, getting a lot of volume. And even in his bad games, he's still scoring 12, 14 points with his receiving prowess as well out of the backfield. So this week with the workload and bye weeks, Conner's a top 12 option. 13, DeAndre Swift of the Chicago Bears. This week a good matchup versus the Jaguars. In the first 3 weeks, DeAndre Swift, to be honest, he looked like a running back that possibly could be washed, where he didn't even average 2.5 yards per carry. But the last 2 weeks, he's turned the season around. Last week, a big performance. And then going back to week 4, a monster performance it was for DeAndre Swift versus the Los Angeles Rams, where he went for 29 fantasy points in PPR league. So this week in a matchup versus a weak defense of the Jaguars, I think he goes out there once again and is a solid option. 14, David Montgomery of the Detroit Lions. I've said this a lot. Him and Jahmyr Gibbs, the best 1-2 running back combo in all pro football. Montgomery and Gibbs, they switch off drives. Gibbs obviously the more explosive running back and better receiving back out of the backfield. But Montgomery, goal line wise and between the tackle, very solid running back and a talented running back. And this week at Dallas, a good matchup. Like I said, a banged up defense. He could go in there and do some damage. 15, Bijan Robinson of the Atlanta Falcons. It's definitely been a struggle for Robinson. I know every game he's had double-digit fantasy points this season, but he's definitely not putting up the elite numbers where fantasy owners drafted him in the top 5 overall. So this week a matchup at Carolina, I think it could get Bijan Robinson going. And we know he's a talented running back. He just needs that one breakout game, I believe, and then the rest will fall into place because the talent's there. Just finding the holes and a little bit quicker on some of the plays. He's got to be and not overthink it. 16, Breece Hall of the New York Jets. Breece Hall, first 3 weeks, was putting up those solid numbers. The last 2 weeks, non-existent, and he was putting up free agent type of numbers. 3.5 fantasy points, and then 6.5 fantasy points last week. This week, a good matchup on paper versus Buffalo, where they give up the second most fantasy points to running backs on the season. But I believe Breece Hall is a running back that he could go out there, turn things around. And now with Sal out as head coach, I think this Jet team, it's going to change things up for them. So right now, Breece Hall, he's a running back. He's definitely fallen down the rankings and was the number 2 running back off the board in most fantasy drafts. But I think this week he bounces back and has a decent performance. 17, Tony Pollard of the Tennessee Titans. Tony Pollard, he's been solid this season for this Titan team. Well, last season with the Dallas Cowboys, he didn't get much going, was Tony Pollard, where he had a lot of struggles and the numbers were down. But this season, he's got a good offensive line giving him running lanes, and he's been a good fit with this Tennessee Titan team and definitely outperformed Tajay Spears. So this week, a good matchup versus the Indianapolis Colts that have been gashed on the ground all season long, including last week. We saw Tank Bigsby go for 101 yards and 2 touchdowns. I think Pollard has another good game this week. 18, Ramondre Stevenson of the New England Patriots. So Ramondre Stevenson, last week he was benched. First drive, the start got to Antonio Gibson because of fumble issues. But then Stevenson came in, and once he got going, he had a big ball game with 19.20 fantasy points in PPR league. So this week, I think the numbers will drop off a little bit. This is going to be a game most likely they're trailing early and often, and they have to abandon the run, especially with young quarterback Drake May in there is the starting quarterback this week for this Patriot team. I believe it's going to be tough for them to run the football at times, and they're going to force Drake May to try to beat him. Is this Houston Texan defense? 19, J.K. Dobbins of the Los Angeles Chargers. It's been a good start for J.K. Dobbins. He's been the top guy in the backfield for Los Angeles with Gus Edwards barely doing anything. And Dobbins, the first 2 games of the year, over 130 yards on the ground. And then week 3, a tough matchup versus the Steelers. And week 4, a tough matchup versus the Kansas City Chiefs. This week, not a great matchup as well versus one of the better defenses in the league at the Denver Broncos. With J.K. Dobbins, it just takes one big run for him to have a day. And like I said, he's getting a full workload, and he's a decent receiver out of the backfield as well. 20, Zach Moss of the Cincinnati Bengals. Sound not 100% he's playing in this game as Moss. As of now, I would say it's 50-50. So Zach Moss, good running back in between the tackles, could catch the football out of the backfield, and he's on one of the more high-powered offenses in the league. And this week, a good matchup at the New York Giants, when we know their defense isn't all that great this season. Zach Moss and this Bengal team knows their season's on the line pretty much 1-4. And if Moss plays in this game, I think the volume's going to be there. And we know he's good at the goal line as well, punching it in. 21 Tank Bigsby of the Jacksonville Jaguars. So I know last week they're saying ETN's banged up with the shoulder injury, and they didn't want to push it, so they put Tank Bigsby in and rode with the hot hand in that game versus the Indianapolis Colts. So Bigsby, what a game it was in that one. 101 rush yards, 2 touchdowns, a catch, 13 yards. And I've said this a lot, Bigsby looks like the better back. He definitely looks like an early down back more than Travis Etienne, where he's a passing downs back to me and more quicker and elusive back, with Bigsby being that big guy in between the tackles and guy looking for contact to run over defenders. So this week, definitely a tough matchup at the Chicago Bears, but tough to deny. Tank Bigsby is someone who could be decent after coming off that big game. 22 Najee Harris of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and Najee Harris pretty much the last man standing over here for this Pittsburgh Steelers team. Obviously, Jalen Warren doubtful once again. He's not going to play. Cordell Patterson, so far, no reports coming out if he's going to play. And Harris, he's going to get pretty much a 90% workload for this Pittsburgh Steelers team. And this most likely is going to be a game where they're going to be up, and the game script is they're going to try to run the clock out in the second half at the Vegas Raiders. And Najee Harris, I know the numbers haven't been great, but he's been a running back, like I said, that's been getting good volume all season long. And with bye weeks and injuries at the position, he works his way as a low-end number 2 back option. 23 Travis Etienne of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Like I said, he's got a banged-up shoulder as Etienne. That's why they sat him out mostly in that second half of that game. Plus, Tank Bigsby was playing great football. And this week, a tough matchup at the Chicago Bears. Etienne, his ceiling isn't that high, because I believe this at least could be a 60-40 split in Etienne's favor or a 50-50 split. So with those factors and a tough matchup, it's going to be tough sledding, I think, this week for Etienne to put up a monster performance. 24 Rachaad White, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, pretty much another platoon in the backfield for Tampa Bay, like this Jacksonville Jaguar team. So White, first few games of the year, struggling, barely had 2 yards per carry, but the last couple weeks he's getting things going with Bucky Irving breathing down his neck and starting to get work. And this week, not a great matchup in New Orleans, but we saw last week Kareem Hunt went out there, had a good performance. 25 Bucky Irving, his teammate of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Bucky Irving, he looked decent last week until he fumbled the football, and then the Falcons recovered, got in field goal range, and forced overtime. But Bucky Irving looks like the more elusive back, the healthier back, where Rachaad White definitely looked like he's banged up or maybe even lost the step. So even coming off that fumble, they gave him more opportunities, was Tampa Bay after that, the next drive. So I don't think he's going to be in the doghouse. I still think he could get a workload anywhere from 10 to 15 touches as Bucky Irving. And this week in New Orleans on the fast track, he's a good flex option, I believe. 26, Javonte Williams of the Denver Broncos. So Javonte Williams, number 1 back over there in Denver. Last week, his best game of the season in that blowout victory versus the Vegas Raiders. And this week, it's definitely going to be a tougher matchup. The Los Angeles Chargers, with their solid defense for the most part this season. But Javonte Williams could catch the football out of the backfield. He's the goal line back as well. I know McLaughlin vouched one last week, but usually it's Javonte Williams in that role, and I like him this week as a decent back-end option. 27 Chase Brown of the Cincinnati Bengals. So the last few weeks, Brown's definitely carved out a decent role for the Cincinnati Bengal team. Good receiver out of the backfield. We know he's got burst and pop is Chase Brown, where he is more of a receiving back, but if you need a guy to come in, change a pace, and get a big run here and there, he could do that as well. And when you're in an offense like the Cincinnati Bengal team, he could score from anyone on the field, and he really spreads that football out as Joe Burrow. So this week in a good matchup with the Giants, Chase Brown, I think he could be a decent bye week filler at the RB2 spot, and obviously a good flex option. 28 Rico Dottle of the Dallas Cowboys. Looks like he's the main back over there for this Dallas Cowboy team, with Ezekiel Elliott being phased out the last couple weeks for this Dallas Cowboy team. Last 2 weeks, Dottle's had good workloads and good fantasy games. Week 4 versus Giants, 13.10 fantasy points. And then last week, over 100 total yards in that game for Rico Dottle, and found the end zone with 19.1 fantasy points. So Rico Dottle, he's looked good the last couple weeks. Cowboys obviously have a lot of confidence in him. And this week, it's not a great matchup versus Detroit, where it could be a shootout as well, where Dallas might have to abandon the run. But Dottle still is a flex option, I think, serviceable. 29 Jerome Ford of the Cleveland Browns, so we don't know for sure if Nick Chubb's going to return in this game. But even if Chubb does, I believe it's 50-50 split or 60-40 split in the backfield. But this week could be a game where they're trailing early and often in Philadelphia, who's getting obviously a lot of reinforcements back with A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith returning to the lineup. So the way the game script might go, they're going to be trailing early and often. But Jerome Ford, obviously, we know is a good receiving back, and he's got 3 games of double-digit fantasy points in the first 5 in PPR leagues. 30, Devin Singletary of the New York Giants. Singletary, we'll see if he returns in this game, and it's a good matchup versus Cincinnati Bengals. But the only thing for me is if Singletary returns, I think Tyrone Tracy has earned to get some decent work now for this Giant team after coming off a monster game last week, 18 carries, 129 yards. So this week, like I said, versus Cincinnati, I believe both teams can put points on the board in this one where the Bengals can't stop anyone, and the Giants' defense isn't all that great as well. And this Bengal offense, one of the best offenses in the league. So this week, Singletary, if he plays, he's a back-end option. 31, Alexander Mattison of the Las Vegas Raiders. He got the start last week, was Alexander Mattison. He had a decent ball game, 10.10 fantasy points in PPR leagues. And Zamir White, we'll see if he returns. But Zamir White, to be honest, he's done nothing this season. And we know he's not going to catch the football out of the backfield. So Alexander Mattison, I believe, is the favorite in that backfield. And if you had to choose, even though it's a bad situation and not a great fantasy options in the backfield for Vegas, I would take Mattison. And this week versus Pittsburgh could be a game that trailing early and often and have to pass, where we know Madison is a passing down back. 32, Cam Akers of the Houston Texans. So Joe Mixon, I believe, who knows when he's going to come back to the lineup for this Houston Texan team. So Cam Akers has been getting the start, but Dare Agumbawale has been getting good touches and a good receiving back out of the backfield. But Cam Akers still getting that goal line work, I believe, even though Agumbawale out-touched him last week. And this week, it's a pretty decent matchup at the New England Patriots, I believe, for this Houston Texan team, where Cam Akers could be a serviceable flex option. 33, Nick Chubb of the Cleveland Browns. So I don't know if he's going to play, but obviously the practice window opened up last week. But Nick Chubb, they're going to take it easy with him, especially 1-4 in the season. They're not going to want to run him out there right away for 20-25 touches is this Cleveland Brown team. And it's a tough matchup, like I said, at the Philadelphia Eagles, where if they're down early and often, I believe if Chubb is active, we don't even see him much if they're down. But Nick Chubb, we know he's a good running back. He was a top back the last few years before tearing his knee up last season. And this week, I think Nick Chubb, if he plays, his ceiling isn't high. Next back, Roschon Johnson of the Chicago Bears. Roschon Johnson's been the goal line back over the last couple weeks. And we know they've been phasing out Khalil Herbert, so he's the backup back as Johnson. Last week, 10 carries, 25 yards, 2 touchdowns. And this Bear offense, they just try and find different ways to win ball games, where Caleb Williams, for the most part, has been struggling. So Johnson, he's been a good change of pace back, decent receiver out of the backfield. But like I said, he's been the goal line option the last couple weeks at times for Chicago. 35, Tyrone Tracy of the New York Giants. We don't know if it's going to be a split. We don't know if Singletary's going to play or not. But I'm assuming, obviously, Singletary's going to play. But Tracy last week definitely had a coming out party. He was the 5th-round rookie in the NFL draft this season. And Tracy, he looked good. He has burst in the backfield. And maybe at this point, he could be a better overall back than Singletary. But in my opinion, he's definitely earned work. And this week versus Cincinnati, a beatable defense, he could be an option in the 36 and final back I'm ranking. Dare Agumbawale, who's definitely an under-radar running back, who's out there in tons of fantasy leagues. Like I said, 21 touches last week in that ball game versus the Buffalo Bills. And he's a good receiving back out of the backfield. And he fits the scheme of this Houston Texan team. So if Joe Mixon's out, Agumbawale is going to get good work, obviously. And with a good matchup in New England, he could be a deep dive sleeper and someone who can help fantasy owners. So that's the top 36 backs I'm ranking for Week 6 of the fantasy football season.